Thanks for joining my session. My name is Heiko, and I want to talk about how to make PowerShell a real solution. And so we're going to have 45 minutes of fun with PowerShell, how to simplify the way you develop, manage, and delegate PowerShell. So first, of course, thanks to the sponsors. We are actually ScriptRunner. We are one of them, and I'm very happy to be part of this community event. And so what we are going to talk about is really, PowerShell management. So first off, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the solution is, and then we're going to look into my demo environment, and I'm gonna show you a couple of examples and how you can really take PowerShell to the next level and make it a solution that everyone can really make use of. When you have questions, you can always put them into the chat. I will look at this throughout the session, and then also at the end of the session, we will have some time for a little Q&A. All right, and another important information, that's why I have this background. Today, the new AC/DC album came out. It's really cool, so you should check it out. Not during the session, but maybe afterwards. All right, so what are we doing? What is ScriptRunner all about? It's about having PowerShell and a centralized PowerShell solution and management solution around that. We're a group of people, around 20 at the moment, so that's me. You can hit me on GitHub, on LinkedIn, via email, of course, and we are very much into supporting community and also educating people around PowerShell. One of the things that we are actually doing is we have a PowerShell cheat sheet that they can put on your office wall, on your home office wall, and you can get that for free. You can just register and we send it throughout the globe. So if you're interested in that, you can always do that. And so that's maybe interesting for you because it helps you with your when you're using PowerShell, maybe frequently or maybe just once in a while. It really helps you to just get an idea about how PowerShell works, the main commandlets, how pipeline works and stuff like that. We also just recently published a new ebook. It's about PowerShell security. It's 140 something pages that covers all the different aspects of PowerShell and security. So that's another very interesting information, I think. So if you want to learn more about how to secure PowerShell, what kind of built-in functionality is there in PowerShell, so you can always go and also download that free ebook around PowerShell security. All right, so what is ScriptRunner and why are we talking about making PowerShell a real solution? The reason for that is that PowerShell, of course, is a great technology. You can do many things. You can use it on not only on Microsoft platforms, you can use it for VMware, for AWS, for Google Cloud and whatever. As long as you really know how to PowerShell works, you have the time to write your scripts, and last but not least, you have the permissions to do things with your PowerShell scripts and connect to your Azure subscription, to your Office 365 tenant, and so on. And that pretty much, of course, applies to the IT experts, to the IT pros. So if you're into PowerShell and you're using that, it's great. You can do, as I said, many great things, as long as you're in this expert circle. The challenges that we see here is if you try to delegate the execution of scripts, because maybe you want to give this to somebody in helpdesk, or maybe to other line of business people to maybe run it, to start some onboarding, some offboarding, or spinning up new VMs. That's it's not impossible, but it's quite difficult. You have to organize that. You have to think about security, and that's exactly one of the issues that we see here, because there is no centralized management for all the different bits and pieces around PowerShell. Your scripts, the credentials, the way somebody is able to run a script or to execute a script. That's not really built into PowerShell. And so what happens is that if you're using PowerShell, it's probably it's you as the IT bros, the IT experts, who are really the only ones who are running the scripts. And so which means the advantages of PowerShell of automating recurring tasks is still something that belongs to the IT experts. And so what ScriptRunner does is really to take all that great stuff that you can do with PowerShell and make it accessible to people who maybe never even heard about PowerShell, but they should be able to get the job done, to spin up VMs, maybe creating new teams based on your guidelines and stuff like that. And so the key for all that, from our perspective, is centralization. So it's really about taking all the different aspects of PowerShell and centralize them. Why? Because number one, we want to standardize, right? Because no matter if it's user A or B, starting an onboarding, offboarding, creating maybe a new SharePoint site or whatever, it should always happen the same way. So you want to make sure everybody works with the same latest version and approved version of a PowerShell script, and we don't want to send these scripts around and put them on various maybe network shares, and nobody knows where's the latest one and stuff like that. So it's really about having a standardized approach, which also means, of course, we want to use that scripts on a product base, but maybe also you want to kind of develop scripts in a team or in multiple teams. And then if we're thinking about really broaden the audience for PowerShell, of course, we also want to have some monitoring. We want to know what script ran at what time, how long did it take, was there an issue with connecting to a specific backend system and stuff like that. Having these monitoring capabilities, which comes because when we standardize the execution of PowerShell, you have all that information in a central place. Another very important aspect, of course, is security. And that's kind of a twofold thing. One thing is, of course, if I'm thinking about, I want to enable somebody in helpdesk to use a script to create a new Azure VM. I don't want to make this person become an administrator in my Azure subscription. Or if I want to enable somebody maybe in HR to manage out of office notifications for people who call in sick, I don't want to make this person become Office 65 admin. So this is the one aspect. And the other aspect is, of course, we need to have some credentials to connect to this backend system. And these credentials have to be managed and stored centrally as well. So these are the two aspects: the credentials that should be managed centrally, and the second one is really to make sure I don't have to make everybody who I want to enable to use that to become an admin in my backend system. And all that leads to really then saying, okay, with all these possibilities, I can think about taking this recurring task that at the moment I am the one as an administrator to run it and give it to somebody in helpdesk. Or maybe I even have maybe end user scenarios where I want to take tasks to this kind of people. And automation is another important aspect when it comes to not just people should be able to trigger a PowerShell script, but maybe it should be a ServiceNow system, it should be an SAP, a SharePoint workflow, or a Power App. So really having a third-party system also taking part of that whole aspect of running PowerShell in a well-organized and secure way. And so it's about, one thing is about there are people who are should be enabled to use it. And then, of course, second step typically is, of course, you might have I'm sure you have scheduled processes here for housekeeping things, and then the third one is really enable other systems to simply use our REST API to call and to run scripts with the right parameters. And the way we achieve that, it all starts with centralizing the scripts. And so we are all taking all the scripts that you would like to use and you want to delegate and to automate into a central repository, which also means that can, of course, be synchronized with systems like GitHub or TFS or Azure DevOps. So let's say if you have your CI/CD pipeline going on, and as soon as a script is tested and it's moving to the production branch, and it can be automatically become available for ScriptRunner. And it's not just the script, it's also the modules. So if we think about doing things in Azure or in Teams or with VMware, you always have this particular PowerShell modules. And because we are running all that script centrally on the ScriptRunner server, we only need to have that modules also on one single place, which is the ScriptRunner and the ScriptRunner server, so which also simplifies that process. When it comes to managing the credentials, we also support password servers. So at the moment we support CyberArk, Pleasant, and Psychotic. Together with the new credential management module, we're also going to support, of course, Azure Key Vault. And I think I'm going to dig in here a little bit deeper. So because what's interesting and important to know is that if we talk about running scripts, it's only the ScriptRunner server that actually executes the script. That's why we call them the execution proxy. So ScriptRunner is the only instance that runs the script that needs to have access to the credentials, needs to have access to the backend system, no matter if it's on-premise, in the cloud, hybrid, or whatever, because every execution of a script is done on the ScriptRunner machine. Very important aspect of that whole concept, because on the other side, when we look here to the user, we want to enable these people to have some tasks in Azure, in Office 65, in SharePoint, in VMware, whatever. These people, they don't need, number one, they don't need to have any access to this backend system, and they don't need to have permissions in this backend system, because what you decide to enable these people for is done in ScriptRunner. So in ScriptRunner, you delegate if this user is able to do something in Office 65 or in Teams or in SharePoint or in SQL or whatever. So that's all managed by ScriptRunner. And again, there's no need to have these people to be somewhere near that actual, what we call here the system zone. So that's one of the very important aspects here to make it a real secure solution. And again, as I mentioned before, without making these people admin in your backend system. And because we're talking about people who are in helpdesk, or maybe end users that maybe never heard about PowerShell or don't even know that this console exists or whatever, it has to be easy. And so what we're doing here is that we automatically transform your PowerShell scripts into a web user interface. And what does that mean? We are looking into the Synopsis to hopefully find some descriptions for your parameters, because they automatically will be displayed. And then we look at the parameters itself, and depending on what parameters we find, we display them. If it's a date time parameter, we automatically translate that into a date picker, for example. If you, let's say, if you're using some regular expressions to make sure the input is correct, we also use that, of course, when we run that script, and we create that user interface on the fly automatically from your script. So there's no need to write any additional code. And what also happens here is that, so this is an example for creating a team. And if you know that maybe that command-led new team, you know that there are, I think, dozens of parameters available, and we only see 3 of them in this user interface. And that's because you can hide all that parameters that you don't want to show to the user. They still, of course, most of them probably are still pre-configured based on your guidelines, based on your governance rules in your organization, but it's nothing that you want to really show to the user. And so that's why in this case, we just see the name, the description, and the members of a team. Everything else is still being used when the scripts are executed, but they are not visible to the user because it's not necessary, and because we want to make it as easy as possible for these people to use PowerShell without knowing it, and make it as easy as possible, as I said. So with that, you can then decide, okay, what kind of tasks, what kind of, we call them ScriptRunner actions, what kind of actions you would like to delegate to these people. And what we see here is, so each tile represents a use case, and depending on what you delegate within ScriptRunner, a person might see 1 tile, 2 tiles, 3 tiles, 4 tiles, whatever, depending on what kind of backend system these people should be able to, or should be able to do things. This is then, let's say, the way that you make this accessible to these people. And again, there is no PowerShell inside, so to speak, for these people, because everything that is really PowerShell related goes on the ScriptRunner backend, and we are handling all the different necessary bits and pieces. And then, of course, you can also integrate that ScriptRunner server into your processes and into your workflows to enable a monitoring system to trigger scripts when a sensor detects an error, for example, or if an onboarding process got approved in ServiceNow or in SAP. And then these systems can be enabled to talk to ScriptRunner and to make that make this connection, again, of course, secure, and to make sure that they have to authenticate and they're allowed to trigger particular action and stuff like that. And so this is the kind of this threefold way of running scripts when you're using ScriptRunner. So one, of course, is doing it manually. Somebody uses that tiles in a web browser. The second one is you have schedule processes, which also, of course, is an important aspect when it comes to centralization. Instead of having that scheduling being done on multiple machines and using the built-in functionality of Windows or stuff like that, you can really do that centrally. And then, of course, we have the third one, which is the automatic approach, where there are third-party systems, and based on particular triggers, based on particular events, ScriptRunner executes the scripts in the background for these people, for the systems in this case. All right, so with this, I'm going to switch to my VM, and we are going to look at a few examples. So as I said, it all starts with the scripts. And so here we are in my admin app, my ScriptRunner admin app, and here I have the list of all my scripts that I have available here, and I can work with my filtering here to say, okay, I only want to see my Azure scripts, or I only want to see my team scripts, for example. You also might realize that we also detect if a script contains functions, which means you can later on decide if you just want to maybe delegate and use a particular function from within a script, or maybe the full script, for example. We also detect if there are some errors within the script. That's something that we also detect. And of course, as I said, you can easily integrate that and synchronize that with Git or Azure DevOps, for example. So here are all the scripts. And you can see I have 1,000 something scripts, and most of them I didn't write myself, and because well, I'm lazy. And reason number one, and reason number two is we have what we call action packs on GitHub, and these are hundreds of ready-to-use scripts. So if you go to github.com/scriptrunner, there is this section here called Action Packs, and here you can see for many different platforms, many different use cases, you can see ready-to-use scripts, which number one, maybe depending on where you are in your PowerShell journey, helps you to understand how PowerShell works in general. It also shows you how we develop our scripts, which is simply following the best practice approach by Microsoft. So we have the Synopsis, we have the parameter, we have the parameter descriptions. You also maybe already realize we add some special flavors to it and some additional functionalities. For example, you can have, in this case, bilingual descriptions depending on if a user switches from English to German, for example. Then we have, of course, all the necessary parameters, and then, of course, running using the commandlets. So this is a good starting point. Also, if you're maybe at the beginning of your PowerShell journey to see, number one, how that works. And also maybe if you're more advanced, to maybe also to get some inspiration about the things that you could do with PowerShell. So, so what I did here is really most of the scripts that I have here are coming from that action package. All right. Step 2, we need credentials to connect to Office 365, to Azure, to AWS, to VMware, whatever. So these credentials here, in my case, is a kind of a mix. I have credentials that I have stored in my Windows credential store, and I have credentials that ScriptRunner is going to use and to retrieve during runtime. When in this case, I want to connect to my ScriptRunner, or the script wants to connect to an Exchange server. So in this case, I have a machine there where I'm running a Pleasant server. So this credential will be retrieved from this machine, and so based on the ID of that credential that is stored in that password server. And as you might see, so we already have some kind of experimental implementation of the secrets management. You also see here that we, of course, now support SSH keys, and that's because PowerShell 7, which now not only supports Windows but also Linux and Mac OS, so you can manage these SSH keys, of course, inside of ScriptRunner as well. So that's step number 2. So step number 1 was we need scripts. Step number 2, we need to credential. Step number 3 is we need to know, or ScriptRunner needs to know, what are the actual backend systems that we want to use in the background. So it might be, again, maybe a local Exchange server, it might be Office 365, it might be Azure or whatever. And so what happens, like in this example, is I'm telling the system, okay, where do I go to? What's the machine? What's the system? What's the backend system? And what is the credential? So the list of credentials I can choose here, which means later on, credentials are nowhere to be seen in any script, and God forbid, of course, not for any users, because everything is managed centrally here with ScriptRunner, and you can create different kinds of targets, and that's kind of following what PowerShell is offering. You can have a local execution. You can of course use PowerShell remoting, which also includes things like if you need to get use some jump hosts because backend systems might not be accessible directly, for example, or you have some Chia endpoints or whatever. You can also combine targets to say, okay, I have all my Office 365 subscriptions, and I put them into a collection because my housekeeping processes should run on all of these backend systems, obviously with different credentials, which I'm configuring on the individual targets, but I can keep them together and put this housekeeping process into one single action, and then it's being executed on my backend system. And then of course we have the obvious cloud services as special as built-in target types like Office 365 and Azure, but of course thanks to PowerShell you can connect to all kinds of backend systems, of course. And so, for example, if we're just going back to that Office 365 here, then of course now Microsoft step by step goes into that modern authentication direction. We also support certificate-based authentication and stuff like that. And you could say, okay, there's a target that I'm only using for Exchange, and another one maybe only for Teams. So you can just mix and match that targets as you need. And so we have the scripts, we have the credentials, we have the targets, and with this, we can create actions, and actions are the use cases. It's like, okay, somebody should spin up a new VM in Azure, somebody should be able to create a new team, or creating an out-of-office notification for somebody. And if we want to take a quick example here, maybe we look at one that is related to Teams. I'm starting with just running it, and then we're going to look at what kind of bits and pieces we have in there. So this action is kind of, okay, I want to enable somebody to create a team. And this kind of reflects what I just showed in that slide before. And so, because it's ACDC day today, maybe we make it like this, for whatever reason. So I'm taking the name, and then I'm choosing, oh, it's Angus. Okay, what a surprise. And of course I could choose several people. So what happens now is now in the backend, ScriptRunner, the ScriptRunner engine takes that input and runs the script. And here, if I'm clicking down here, I can see in real time what's actually happening. So I'm having all that detailed information in, about the activities. Now, if I'm going into the edit mode of that action, I can see that all that parameters that are available for, based on that commandlet for creating a new team, they are all there. But of course, we want to make it easy for the user. That's why the configuration of that different settings, like should that be private or public, how should we handle Giphy, stuff like that. That's all already configured, and then we just say just hide that from the input form. And so that's why I'm not using it. I'm not seeing it, but of course for the execution of that script later on, of course it's being used, but it's nothing that I really need to show to the user. And so here we even have pre-configured the channels that will be created within the team. And we see something else here, because instead of typing the name of the users, I had this drop-down list. And this comes from what we call queries. And with these queries, you can decide what this user should be able to see. So in this case, it was the list of the existing Office 365 mailboxes. And so let's say, okay, we have created that, and now this should be something that I want to give to my people in helpdesk. And so I'm starting to delegate. So I say, okay, I'm giving that to a particular group or groups of people, because they should actually be consuming that scripts. And so if I'm switching to the context of an helpdesk person, this is our Delegate app, and here I have the same kind of information. I have the name, I have the description, and the name and the members of the groups. And so it's a simplified view on what we just saw in the on the admin side of things, because we don't need to show the parameter names and stuff like that. And with this approach of really automatically creating a user interface, deciding which parameter is pre-configured based on your company guidelines, who should be able to use that based on the delegation, you can say, okay, now I also want to enable somebody in helpdesk to maybe spin up a new VM in Azure. And here is the same approach. It's like, okay, of course we need a name. Then there is the selection of, okay, what kind of images should be selectable. And I want to avoid that these people are spinning up VMs all over the place in regions that we are not making sense, for example. And we also want to avoid that people are spinning up the most expensive VMs, for example. Again, this is based on these queries where you can configure, okay, what is actually the right selection, what should be visible for these users. And based on that, you have the full control, which also means, of course, if you don't want to have a selection of regions, you pre-configure one. Or if you don't want to the people to be able to select various VM sizes, you just pre-configure this as well. And so based on that, it's again, when you're looking at this, of course, the user again doesn't have to know anything about PowerShell, because all that stuff that really belongs to PowerShell is happening somewhere behind the scenes. And for another example, out of office management is kind of the same approach. Again, we display, in this case, the users in the Office 365 tenant. Talking about standardization also might mean that people should not just type any funny notification text. So you have templates. And because we have a date time parameter, we automatically create using that displaying that date time picker. And then again, I can just run that. And now in the background, it's not the user that executes the script, it's the ScriptRunner server that executes the script that connects to Office 65 and is then creating, in this case, this out of office notification. Now, and here as an end result, you can display, okay, so this is what we've actually done. So we created a scheduled out of office for a user here. And all these activities are ending up in the centralized dashboard. So to see what's actually happened, it's like, okay, there was this user Tina, and she started this action to configure something in Office 65. You have the full control, and you see all the parameters. You see what actually happened during the execution, and if there are some errors occurring, for example, of course, you can take a look at that and see, okay, what's actually happening. So in this case, maybe there was some connection issue, for example. So you have the full control about all these activities around your PowerShell execution. And so step one is somebody is using that on a scheduled base. The second one is, okay, you might have some activities where you want to make sure, okay, something runs every hour. For example, there's synchronization of a GitHub repo down to my ScriptRunner server, which also means you can configure email notifications, so you know if something went wrong, you got notified, which also means, of course, you could just push a notification to a Teams channel as well. So for all the housekeeping processes, you can have that scheduled approach, running things at what time you wish. And so that's the second step for executing that PowerShell script. And the third one is really going into the full automated way, which means you can enable systems to talk to ScriptRunner to execute scripts. So I'm allowing, in my case, I have a PHP monitoring system up and running in my environment, and I'm allowing this machine to talk to this ScriptRunner server. It has to authenticate with the right credential, and then it can trigger whatever script is necessary to solve an issue that maybe a sensor detected somewhere on whatever backend system. So this is how third-party system can also be enabled to talk to and to trigger scripts again. So even if these systems maybe have some kind of ways to run PowerShell scripts, it might be still some decentralized stuff. So to centralize all that execution together with the scripts and the credentials and the way it's presented in the web user interface really, makes that, as it's stated, this PowerShell thing a real solution together with ScriptRunner. And because we also talked about, okay, you have that users that clicking on a child to do something, and in Active Directory, in Google, in Azure, Office 65, or whatever, you also might want maybe this functionality being available within the environment where a user is working day in, day out, because maybe you have a self-service portal or something like this. And what you can do with these particular actions based on what you would like to delegate is you could have any kind of website. So this is a very simple website just to to demonstrate, okay, to create in a new VM. So what you see here is the actual ScriptRunner action that is also available here on the child side, but now it's integrated directly into that web environment where a user is just familiar with. And again, they don't even need to know that, number one, of course, there's PowerShell, number two, there's ScriptRunner. It's just to enable these people to get their job done. And so that's what's happening here. And we have the same selection possibilities that we have in the Delegate app. So this really kind of enables or enhances the landscape of PowerShell, really to bring that technology or use that technology for almost everybody in the organization, but without training these people. This is PowerShell, and without giving them credential and permissions and stuff like that, because it's all done based on that management layer, so to speak, which is our ScriptRunner system, that makes that really so easy to make that, to give this to really everybody. And in scenarios where you might have some more complex, maybe selection processes where you want somebody should select maybe first let's say an ESX server or an Azure subscription, and then we want to see the VMs and then the properties of a VM. You can do that also based on that functionality within ScriptRunner, which saying, okay, first I want that somebody is selecting an OU path, for example. In step 2, then I can see, I show the groups that are part of that OU, and then when I selected the group, I can see then, in this case, the members of this group. In other scenarios, again, this could be an ESX server, or this could be an Azure subscription, or a SharePoint farm, then the SharePoint site, and then the permissions maybe. And all that happens in a way that you also, again, can control. Maybe somebody is by default only responsible for EMEA, so that would be the only thing that this group of people would be able to work with. So you have the full control about what is visible to these users. And and on the other side, the underlying script, of course, is always staying pretty static, because you don't have to put all that selection bits and pieces into your scripts. And talking about the scripts, here I'm still in the good old ISE. Why? Because we have a plugin for the PowerShell ISE that enables you to have some kind of simple check-in, check-out mechanisms for your scripts, to say, okay, or maybe even just have some possibilities to view the scripts, and to also to make sure that if you have multiple groups of people working with scripts, so let's say you have your SharePoint people, you have your Azure people, and you want to make sure that the Azure people are not messing around with the scripts of the SharePoint guys, for example. You can manage that based on permissions within ScriptRunner. So you can have some kind of team functionality, so that again you can make sure that, okay, the Exchange guys are not messing up the SharePoint scripts or something like this. So this is something that you can also control here with our nice little ISE add-on. We have some functionality already also for VS Code, and there will be coming more in the future. So that's in the making, so to speak. Yeah, with this, going back to that interface here. So again, with the admin app, you really get all that components that you need, that are necessary to successfully and securely run and manage and delegate the PowerShell scripts here within the admin app. And with the Delegate app, you can just decide what should be really available for users, again, outside, of course, of the PowerShell expert circle. And with this integration mode, you can just take every use case, every action, and just make it as accessible here as easy as possible. All right, so with this, I'm going back to my slides. Yeah, so I showed you a little bit around that, different bits and pieces. And of course, as I said, it's not just Windows PowerShell that you can use with ScriptRunner. It's also, of course, PowerShell 7, where just PowerShell 7.1 just got released yesterday, which opens up a whole nother world of just not just taking PowerShell for all the Windows systems, but really use it also for Linux and, of course, and Mac OS. So if you take a look at the solution from a let's say high level perspective in the different roles in the organization, if you're the administrator, you can really use ScriptRunner to delegate recurring tasks, which takes this most probably recurring and annoying task off your desk to help desk. To your helpdesk people, for example, the helpdesk people get lucky or are lucky and happy because they can just react much faster. They don't have to run or to create tickets for the admin people to solve issues of their users, so they can deliver a better service. And thinking about really access to that use cases also to end users, they can just simply solve issues themselves without help desk and without the administration. If you're the developer of your scripts, of course, because it's broadened the audience for not just having this PowerShell somewhere in the IT department and it's only used there, you can really think about much more and many more use cases in this direction. And from the DevOps space, of course, with ScriptRunner, we have an environment where you have a controlled way, together with systems like GitHub or Azure DevOps, you have a controlled way of deciding, okay, which script or which version of a script becomes available and is being rolled out and can be then really consumed by the users. And yeah, and if you like what I showed you and you might be interested in maybe getting your hands into the solution, you're very welcome to do that. So you can go to our download website on scriptrunner.com and download the solution. You can try it 30 days for free with the full set of functionality. If you might need some longer time for running the ScriptRunner, of course, you can do this as well. Yeah, so with this, I'm at the end of my session. So yeah, if you have questions, you might unmute yourself or you're writing your questions in the chat window, maybe. Don't be shy. Okay, no questions. No questions. So, okay, maybe there will be another one. I will be here for a couple of more minutes. And of course, we're always interested in getting some feedback to the organizer of this great event. So you can just scan that QR code and yeah, letting the organizers know how the sessions are, so to get some feedback and to maybe even more improve the event for next year. Okay, so still no questions? Then, yeah, once again, thank you for joining this session and have fun with the rest of the sessions that are still coming up. And the session is being recorded, so you might also want to go back and watch maybe some additional details later on. All right, thanks, and yeah, have a great weekend. Bye-bye.